There's a kind of grief no one talks about. The grief of being loved for a version of you that never really existed. You were told you were easy to love, but only when you were easy to handle. Only when you smiled at the right times. Only when your sadness stayed quiet enough not to ruin the mood. You learned early that love had terms and conditions. Stay cheerful, stay grateful, stay useful. The moment you cracked, the moment your voice shook or your energy dropped, people started pulling away. Not because you were broken, but because you stopped pretending to be fine. They didn't love you. They loved the mask. And the second it slipped, they lost interest. So now you're here, not to be fixed, not to be saved, just to be told the truth for once. You're not crazy. You're not too much. You're just done playing dead to be liked. And that's not weakness. That's fucking survival.
You didn't become lovable when you were honest. You became lovable when you were manageable. When your pain didn't take up too much space. When your sadness came with a warning label and an apology. When you cried just enough to seem human, but not enough to make anyone else uncomfortable. You learned, probably young, that there are two kinds of attention. The kind that hugs you when you're loud and hurting, and the kind that vanishes when you stop performing peace. And for most people, you got the second one. It wasn't safe to fall apart. Not at home, not at school, not in church pews where your doubt made people shift uncomfortably. You got good at being the one who listened, the one who stayed calm, the one who made everything easier. But who the fuck made anything easier for you? In America, they teach you how to succeed, not how to feel. You're trained for productivity, not presence. They love the kid who gets straight A's while their family collapses. They love the employee who picks up the extra shift after losing a loved one. They praise the survivor who says, "It made me stronger," even when it damn near killed them. Because if you're not inspirational, your suffering is inconvenient. That's the trade. That's the fucking contract. You start to notice this pattern. You open up just a little too much and someone goes quiet. You show your real anxiety and suddenly they're busy. You drop the smile for half a second and they look at you like you've betrayed them. Because people aren't addicted to your truth, they're addicted to your illusion. They want the strong friend, the positive coworker, the spiritually grounded partner. And once you start showing up with messy energy, with questions instead of answers, with actual emotional needs, they start treating you like a liability. Think about it. How many times have you been told to be strong when all you needed was space to fall apart? How many times has your grief been met with silence? How many times has your sadness made people uncomfortable, not because it was extreme, but because it was real? That's the cruelty of it. They don't leave because you're broken. They leave because your brokenness doesn't entertain them. They're not interested in the raw version of you, the one that trembles, doubts, curses, freezes, bleeds. They want the curated version, the cleaned up edit with the sad parts cropped out, the digestible trauma, the palatable pain, the breakdown that ends in a cute little lesson. And when you start asking for more than just surface love, when you stop showing up with armor and start showing up with needs, you watch them slip away, one by one. Not because you're toxic, but because you stopped being easy to swallow. Because you dared to stop translating your pain into productivity. Because you finally said, "I can't keep being everything for everyone else while no one is anything for me." Here's the thing no one warns you about. Being authentic might cost you the people who were only interested in your performance. But it will also save your fucking life. You can't keep burning yourself down just to keep someone else warm. You can't keep shrinking just to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. If your honesty pushes someone away, they were never holding you. They were holding the illusion of who they needed you to be. Let that illusion die. Let those relationships rot if they can't survive your truth. Because this isn't about being negative. It's about being human. It's about refusing to act like everything's fine when you're bleeding internally. It's about choosing integrity over image. And yeah, that's going to scare some people, especially the ones who only felt powerful when you were pretending to be okay. Let them be scared.
Let them walk. You're not here to be their emotional pacifier. You're not here to keep things light so they don't have to face their own darkness. You're here to live fully, truthfully, loudly if necessary, and anyone who can't handle that was never really with you to begin with. That's the brutal part of healing, realizing how many connections were built on your silence. How many people only liked you when you were emotionally neutered? How many loves were just contracts? Don't show me anything that forces me to grow. But that's also where the freedom starts. Not in pretending everything's fine, but in finally saying, this is me. No edits, no mask. Take it or leave it. And if they leave, good. They were never loving you in the first place.
You start to notice it everywhere. This unspoken rule that you can be sad as long as you make it pretty, as long as you post a quote at the end, as long as your voice doesn't crack too much, as long as you wrap your suffering in something palatable like growth or purpose. Because raw pain, that makes people squirm. That reminds them they haven't dealt with their own. In the workplace, it shows up like this. We're a family here. Translation, you'll be expected to bleed quietly and call it loyalty. You could be 3 panic attacks deep into your morning and still be praised for your resilience. They don't care that you're unraveling. They care that you keep meeting deadlines. Burnout is called dedication. Overfunctioning is work ethic. And saying, I'm struggling, is professional suicide. You're not allowed to be human, only useful. And then there's church, where grief is spiritual failure, where depression is a faith problem, where trauma is met with, just pray about it. You walk in with a soul barely holding together and someone throws a Bible verse at you like a Band-Aid. God gives his toughest battles to his strongest soldiers. No, sometimes life just fucking hurts. And quoting scripture doesn't stop the bleeding. But try saying that out loud and watch how fast the room goes cold, because honest pain makes religious spaces uncomfortable. Not because they don't believe in God, but because they forgot that Jesus wept too. Then there's your family, where silence is tradition, where therapy is still a punchline, where you're told, we didn't have time to be sad back in my day. So you sit at dinner, smiling through clenched teeth, while everyone pretends nothing's wrong. You bring up your anxiety, and suddenly the room gets quieter than a funeral. Because vulnerability disrupts the fantasy. And in families like yours, image is everything. And social media, that's a whole different kind of hell. You scroll through feeds full of people in pain who've learned how to package it into something digestible. Crying in soft lighting, grieving in slow motion, turning breakdowns into brand content. Not because they want to, but because if you don't aestheticize your trauma, the algorithm ignores you. If you're raw, you're too much. If you're healed, you're inspirational. But if you're somewhere in between, angry, lost, tired, you're invisible. So what do? You adapt. You edit yourself. You mute your darkness just enough to stay liked. And after a while, you start to forget what your real voice even sounds like. You begin to wonder if you're broken, because nothing they suggest ever helps. Journaling feels like screaming into a void. Meditating makes you feel like a fraud. Gratitude lists become a trap. How can I be sad if I have a roof over my head? But gratitude without space for grief is just emotional gaslighting. You're not crazy for feeling what you feel. You're not weak for needing more than what this culture offers. You're just finally noticing the lie. The one that says, if you're not happy, you're ungrateful. If you're still hurting, you're not trying hard enough. No one talks about how healing takes time, ugly, inconvenient, non-linear time, and that most people don't actually want you to heal. They want you to stop making them uncomfortable. Here's what nobody tells you. You can be grateful and still be fucking tired. You can believe in God and still feel abandoned. You can love your family and still need distance. You can have a good job and still want to disappear. Two things can be true. But toxic positivity tells you otherwise. It tells you that suffering is optional, and if you're still in pain, it's your fault. That's not healing. That's erasure. You've been sold a version of growth that looks suspiciously like compliance. You've been told to move on from things that broke your bones, to let go of things that shaped your nervous system, to forgive before your body even feels safe. This isn't recovery. This is performance. And deep down, you know it. You feel it every time you lie and say, "I'm doing okay." Every time you fake a smile to avoid being pitied or preached at. You've become fluent in hiding, not because you want to lie, but because the truth costs too damn much. But here's the catch. Suppressing your pain doesn't make it disappear. It just makes it grow teeth. It morphs into rage, into numbness, into chronic exhaustion that no amount of self-care rituals can touch. Because self-care isn't face masks and yoga. It's telling the fucking truth. And most people don't want to hear it. So if you've been feeling like a failure, if you've been wondering why all the right things still leave you empty, maybe it's not you. Maybe it's the culture that punishes honesty, the systems that reward emotional obedience, the families that hand you silence and call it strength. You're not the problem. You're just awake. There comes a moment, and maybe it already hit you, when you just can't keep up the act anymore. You wake up and your body feels like concrete. The thought of answering a single text makes your chest tighten. You try to smile at someone and it feels like your face forgot how. And it doesn't come with warning signs. It's not always a dramatic collapse. Sometimes it's just silence. A long, stretching silence that lives inside your bones and refuses to leave. That's not weakness. That's survival mode finally breaking down from the weight it was never meant to carry. You told yourself for years, "I'm fine." You practiced it like a fucking mantra. Because admitting otherwise felt dangerous. Because you knew that if you let one crack show, the whole damn dam might burst. And you were right. That mask wasn't just about hiding pain. It was holding your entire sense of self together. So when it finally slips, when your voice shakes, when you can't show up like you used to. The people who only loved the mask start to disappear. That's when it really hurts. Not just because you're breaking, but because now, suddenly, you see who was only there for the performance. The moment you stop being strong for everyone else, the phone goes quiet. The texts stop. The room empties. You're left with echoes of connections that were never real, just transactions. You offer stability, they offer presence. You offer ease, they offer affection. You stop being easy, and they disappear like smoke. Here's the part no one wants to talk about. Sometimes your worst heartbreak isn't romantic. It's the grief of realizing people only liked you when you were pretending. You weren't too much. You were just too real. And they didn't leave because you were struggling. They left because you stopped entertaining them with your resilience. You tried to be human. And that, apparently, was the deal breaker. That moment, the moment your body says no more, it feels like failure. It feels like you're falling behind, like everyone else got the manual and you're broken inside. But the truth? That collapse is holy. It's the first honest fucking signal your system has sent in years. The panic, the fatigue, the numbness, they're not dysfunctions. They're messages. Messages that say, this isn't sustainable. You weren't meant to survive off scraps. You've been carrying shit that wasn't yours to carry. There's a line people throw around. You don't look like what you've been through. But here's the truth no one says out loud. Sometimes you do look like what you've been through. And that's okay. You look tired because you are. You look withdrawn because you're holding in a storm. You look unmotivated because your soul hasn't felt safe in years. Let yourself look like that. You don't owe anyone a clean version of your suffering. The collapse, the breakdown, it's not your end. It's your body telling the truth louder than your mouth ever dared to. It's the point where pretending becomes more painful than being alone. Where you'd rather sit in the ashes than keep building something that costs your whole identity. And yes, it will cost you people. People who once swore they'd always be there. People who loved your energy until that energy got quiet, until it got heavy, until it started asking for something in return. They leave because your truth exposes their limits. They leave because your pain makes them feel things they've spent their whole lives avoiding. And that's not your responsibility. You were never meant to carry other people's comfort on your back. The pain of losing them is real. It's betrayal, it's loneliness, it's rage wrapped in confusion. But it's also freedom. The freedom of knowing who was only there for the highlight reel. The freedom of finally being seen, even if the ones watching now are fewer. Fewer, but real. Because when you collapse and someone stays, not to fix you, not to preach, not to turn it into a motivational quote, but just to sit there and hold space, that's not just love, that's sanctuary. Your collapse isn't your undoing. It's your unbecoming of everything you were never supposed to be. The good kid, the strong one, the people pleaser, the smiling survivor. You don't have to be that anymore. You're allowed to fall the fuck apart. You're allowed to not bounce back on a timeline. You're allowed to let some things stay broken if fixing them would cost your soul. And if anyone makes you feel guilty for that, for needing rest, for needing silence, for not being yourself lately, understand this. They never knew the real you to begin with. They knew the character, the well-behaved, over-functioning, emotionally contained version of you. And now that you stopped auditioning, they're out.
Let them go. This is the beginning of something raw and painful and real. And maybe, for the first time in your life, something that actually belongs to you. Not the job, not the mask, not the filtered self. Just the you that exists beneath the performance, beneath the trauma response, beneath the need to be liked. You're not falling apart. You're being rebuilt.
So here you are, after the silence, after the collapse, after the masks slipped and the room emptied. What's left? You. Not the you that everyone liked. Not the high-functioning, always smiling, self-sacrificing version. Not the version that kept the group chat alive, remembered everyone's birthdays, showed up even when you couldn't breathe. Just you. Tired. Messy. Real. And despite everything you've been told, that version of you isn't wrong, isn't a burden, isn't too much. It's human. Let's say it out loud. You're not lazy. You're depleted. You're not bitter. You're grieving. You're not distant. You're protecting yourself from people who never protected you. They called it a bad attitude, but really, it's just the residue of being left too many times when you needed someone to stay. They called it emotional instability, but really, it's what happens when you go years carrying pain you weren't allowed to name. You are not the problem. You're the result of the problem. A culture that punishes softness. Families that taught silence as a survival skill. Jobs that celebrate burnout and call it ambition. A country that treats therapy like luxury and trauma like weakness. You were never meant to thrive in this machine. You were meant to feel. And that's what you're finally doing now. Feeling. Everything. Not because you're broken. Because your emotional anesthesia stopped working. Because the emotional anesthesia stopped working. And yes, it hurts. But it also means you're waking the fuck up. Some days, all you'll do is survive. Drink some water, answer one email, sit in silence. That's not failure. That's recovery. Rest isn't laziness. It's protest. It's your nervous system saying, we're not living like that anymore.
There's this myth in our culture that healing is some upward spiral, that every day should be better than the last, that if you relapse into sadness, into silence, into old patterns, you're failing. But healing is messy as hell. It's relapsing, then trying again. It's laughing at something dumb and crying 5 minutes later. It's learning how to sit with pain without letting it swallow you whole. It's learning how to be in your body again, to feel your breath and not flinch, to look at yourself and not apologize. And yeah, not everyone will get it. Some people will still say you're too emotional, too quiet, too intense,
too negative. Let them. That says more about their emotional capacity than it does about your worth. You don't owe anyone a palatable version of your truth. You don't have to smile through grief, shrink your rage, or dilute your sadness for anyone's comfort. You've spent enough time being likable. Now it's time to be honest. You spent enough years editing yourself for the comfort of others. Now it's time to build a life that actually fits the shape of your soul, even if that means starting over. Even if it means walking away from what once felt like home but always demanded your silence. You don't have to be okay right now. You don't have to be healed. You don't have to be high vibe. You don't have to explain your pain in a way that makes sense to someone else. You just have to be here, with yourself, without the costume. Even if you're still scared, even if you're still unraveling, that's not failure. That's truth. And truth is always where the healing starts. So if today all you did was not give up, not answer the text, not go to the party, not fake the smile, that counts. That's sacred. This isn't a fucking competition. There is no gold medal for pretending to be okay. The point of healing isn't to become invincible. It's to become real. To stop living your life as a character in someone else's comfort fantasy. To stop shrinking every time someone flinches at your emotions. To take up space exactly as you are. The world wants your productivity, but your soul wants peace. And for the first time maybe, you're starting to listen to that whisper inside. The one that says, I don't want to go back to who I was. That person was exhausted. The one that says, I'm allowed to be enough even when I'm not performing. This is what healing actually looks like. Not always pretty. Not always public. Not always quick. But real. And if that costs you people, platforms, relationships, identities, good. What's left will finally be yours.
This is the part where it all starts to make sense. Not because things get easier, but because they finally get clear. You look back and realize they didn't love you. They loved your emotional labor. They loved the way you made them feel safe by never showing them your chaos. They didn't love your silence because it was peaceful. They loved it because it kept them from having to grow. That's the sharpest cut, isn't it? The moment you realize that what you called love was often conditional tolerance. It wasn't about you. It was about how useful you were to their comfort. And when that usefulness ran out, when you got too tired to play nice, too real to be polished, too human to be decorative, they ghosted, disappeared. Not with violence, not with anger, but with indifference. That's what stings the most. They didn't argue. They didn't fight to understand. They didn't ask what changed. They just quietly stopped calling, stopped checking in, stopped looking you in the eyes. Because people like that don't want closeness. They want compliance. And when you stopped complying with the performance, they left. Here's the truth no one ever gave you permission to say. It's okay to grieve people who never saw the real you. It's okay to feel angry that you were emotionally exploited, that your softness was weaponized, that your silence was mistaken for strength, and your exhaustion was labeled as character. You were praised for surviving hell, but punished the second you asked to be held. It's okay to admit that some of your relationships were built on emotional blackmail. Smile and we'll stay. Be light and we'll listen. Perform stability and we'll love you. But falter, break, bleed, and watch how fast that unconditional love disappears. And you know what? Let it. Let it disappear. Let it rot. Let it take its fake warmth and go. Because here's what you need to hear. Love. Real love doesn't shrink when you're in pain. It doesn't punish you for falling apart. It doesn't ghost you when you finally stop pretending. Real love makes room. Room for your silence, room for your sadness, room for the ugly parts, the angry parts, the not Instagrammable parts. Real love sits in the fucking mess with you. You're not asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong people. You're not intense. You're emotionally honest in a world that survives on denial. You're not a burden. You were just carrying shit that nobody helped you with for way too long. And when you stopped smiling through it, they made it your fault. But now you know better. You've stopped begging for crumbs of connection. You've stopped apologizing for needing things. You've stopped twisting yourself into versions you don't even recognize just to be palatable. Because the truth is brutal, but clean. If someone only stayed when you were performing, they were never staying for you. They were staying for the act. So what now? Now you start again, but on your own terms. You learn to unlearn the lies, that love must be earned through self-erasure, that your needs are negotiable, that your feelings are too much. You start measuring love by presence, not convenience, by who stays when it's quiet, by who asks how you are and stays long enough to hear the real answer. You learn to trust people not because they say the right thing, but because they show up when you're at your worst, because they don't flinch when your mask comes off, because they don't need you to shrink. And more than that, you learn how to show up for yourself, to stop waiting for someone else to make it okay, to stop outsourcing your worth to people who were never capable of holding it, to stop editing your story to make others comfortable. You build a life where you can breathe, even if it's quieter, even if it's lonelier at first, even if some people can't come with you. You realize that love isn't loud. It's not grand gestures. It's not performative concern. It's staying. It's listening. It's not needing you to be okay to be worthy. It's someone looking at your brokenness and saying, "You don't have to fix it for me to stay." And maybe you haven't found that kind of love yet. That's okay. Maybe for now, it's just you. You without the act, without the exhaustion of trying to be what everyone else wanted. You in your rawness, in your mess, in your goddamn truth. That's where it starts. Not with being loved, but with no longer settling for being performed with.
There's a moment, and maybe this is it, when you finally stop trying to make it all make sense. When you stop digging for reasons why they left, why they couldn't stay, why they only loved the edited version of you. And in that silence, in that brutal stillness, something shifts. You realize it was never about you being unlovable. It was about them being unequipped to handle what was real. They didn't leave because you were too much. They left because your truth required more than they were willing to give. More patience, more presence, more courage. And they didn't have it. That's not a reflection of your worth. That's a reflection of their limits. You've spent so long trying to become someone who would never be abandoned again. Shrinking, smoothing edges, swallowing needs. But the truth is, no amount of perfection can guarantee safety. Even the most together version of you still got left, still got misunderstood, still felt like a stranger in rooms that once felt like home. So what now? You stop performing. You stop trying to be lovable. You stop rearranging your soul for people who can't see past their own discomfort. Because love that needs to be earned isn't love. It's negotiation. Love that disappears when you're honest isn't love. It's emotional capitalism. And love that punishes you for being human That's not your failure. That's their fragility. This life you're building now, it's slower. It's quieter. Maybe it's lonelier too. But it's honest. And you'd rather sit in the truth alone than die in a crowd of people who only loved your disguise. You're allowed to take up space without explaining your grief, without translating your trauma, without turning your healing into a fucking TED Talk. You don't need to be understood by everyone. You just need to be safe enough to stop bleeding for approval. And sometimes, that safety won't come from others. Sometimes you'll be the one holding your own damn hand in the dark. Not because no one cares, but because you finally do. This is the part where you get to stop begging for permission to exist. You get to stop earning love by being quiet, helpful, lighthearted, easy. Let that version die. Let the mask rot. Let every fake smile that kept you small fucking burn. And what rises? Not perfection, not healing in a bow, just truth. You, as you are, unedited, unapologetic, unavailable for anything less than real. And yes, you're going to lose people. But listen to me when I say this. Let them go. Let anyone who can't hold space for your truth return to the illusion they loved more than you. You are not here to keep anyone comfortable. You are not a mirror for someone else's fantasy. You are a person, messy, complex, holy in your brokenness. And that is enough. If you've made it this far, if you survived the letting go, the collapse, the silence, the truth, then hear this. You're not alone. You never were. You were just surrounded by people who couldn't see what was real because they were still hiding from their own pain. But there are others like you, quietly rebuilding, choosing honesty over approval, choosing peace over performance. We're out here, and we see you.
If you know someone who's still pretending to be okay just to be loved, send this to them. Maybe they need permission to stop performing too. Maybe they're ready to be seen, for real this time.